As the technology of our modern world advances at exponential rates, we're constantly on the verge of new developments and opportunities that dramatically change the way we live our lives. But with these advances come their underlying shadow, the downsides of unintended consequences, and having to sort through a host of emerging ethical issues that come with these new products and services. A great example of this, and one that will be an even more prominent issue in the decades to come, is CRISPR-Cas9 technology. CRISPR is a gene editing tool that allows parts of DNA to be cut out and spliced in, thereby changing whole genome sequences and what traits will be expressed. Currently, CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing kits are sold on websites like GenScript, BioVision, and Thermo Fisher Scientific, and contain all the necessary genetic ingredients and tools to run gene editing experiments. CRISPR gene editing tools can be used to accomplish many great feats. In animal tests, it's been used to eliminate health defects like deafness and sickle cell anemia. Other than fighting genetic diseases and defects, it's been used to create crops that are more nutritious, develop antibiotics and antiviral medicine in a more cost-efficient manner, and even potentially help eliminate malaria and mosquito carriers. But despite these amazing capabilities, CRISPR kits have the potential to create a darker future fraught with moral dilemmas if a proper ethical framework is not established for its use. These gene modification kits being used on humans is where most of the issues arise. Due to the complex nature of genetics and the need for extreme precision, it's inevitable for mistakes and defects to occur, and the users of these CRISPR kits often know this. Genes will occasionally be cut slightly off from where they were intended to be, creating or furthering a defect instead of fixing the problem. New, potentially harmful mutations could also emerge from this, and even if the gene is cut precisely, there's still a chance the edit may not turn out as intended. And due to our society's limited knowledge on the genome and how complex and ever-evolving genes are, there could be unintended dire consequences down the road, like a lack of genetic diversity, which could lead to greater susceptibility to diseases. To evaluate this issue, it will be looked at from a utilitarian perspective, which aims to maximize happiness for the greatest number while minimizing harms, and then a deontological perspective, which is based on a moral duty one must perform. For a utilitarian perspective on the unintended consequences of CRISPR, we're first measuring the benefits of the situation, the elimination of diseases and defects that can come with CRISPR, which will obviously bring great happiness to a number of people. However, when evaluating the costs of CRISPR kits, there's those who will receive worsened conditions because of a botched edit, as altering one gene can change another due to interdependency. Using CRISPR on humans prematurely could decrease trust in the entirety of the gene editing market, despite some of the good it could bring if used safely and properly. On top of that, there could be consequences of lower genetic diversity or the possibility of adverse mutations, leading to the endangerment of the entire human race. While the chances of this happening are low, the severity of this scenario and the number of people it impacts would outweigh the benefits, making it advisable from a utilitarian perspective to not have widespread use of CRISPR at its current stage of development. From a deontological perspective, we have a duty to not engage in practices that could threaten the lives and well-being of a large number of people, even if the chances of such consequences occurring are relatively low. This is a categorical imperative, or something that binds together all rational beings in what they must do or must not do. If the opposite of this rule were to be universalized, and everyone engaged in such actions, eventually, one of those cases would go wrong and large numbers of people would be negatively affected. Future generations would also be unable to consent to this practice, despite the risks it could carry. However, by universalizing the original rule of not using CRISPR because of its possibility of creating a devastating scenario, it prevents such unlikely yet severe cases from occurring. Another ethical issue dealing with the use of CRISPR kits is that it could be used to create a tiered, hierarchical society based on genetics. The concern was drummed up after Chinese scientists modified 2 female embryos to be HIV resistant. The term designer babies are used to describe this phenomena. Children at the embryonic stage could be genetically modified by CRISPR to be stronger, smarter, or better looking, giving them artificial advantages over the general populace who's been unmodified. Especially as the technology would initially be available to the wealthiest, this would only widen gaps of inequality in almost all aspects of life and create a sense of entitlement amongst the genetically modified that they are a rightful ruling class. Evaluating this issue from a utilitarian perspective, it's clear the harms outweigh the benefits brought forth. While a small group of people would receive the obvious benefit of a higher quality of life, the majority of the population would be less happy. They would feel subservient to another class, feel inferior, and feel deprived of opportunity. It would be harder for them to get jobs or better educations than the smarter people who've been modified. There would be less incentive to work hard in any area of life if another could simply outcompete you by having the right genetics. This disincentive could have negative repercussions on the economy as a whole, and the pronounced class conflict would likely lead to social unrest. From a deontological point of view, we have a duty to create a society which is fair and gives people a great amount of autonomy. A society with designer babies would neglect this duty in multiple ways. The genetically modified class, from their position of supposed superiority, could use coercion and manipulation to limit the autonomy and opportunity of those perceived as below them. A fairer world, in contrast, should have less overall coercion. People would also feel great social pressure to genetically modify themselves or their children in order to just be competitive in such a world, despite any reservations they might have about side effects or the ethics of the issue. If the technology became widespread enough, people would feel the need to be modified to just feel normal or accepted, leaving very little regard for personal autonomy. By universalizing the maxim that we should not engage in superhuman trait enhancements when using CRISPR on humans, it will, in the end, create a society with more fairness and autonomy. A solution for the issue of possible defects and greater mutation risks than the larger population is as follows. Until scientists can develop the technology to a place where the side effects and their wider impact are negligible, use this technology only on a limited number of individuals, namely those most at risk and with the most severe of defects and conditions. To solve the issue of designer babies, CRISPR kits should not be allowed to modify a perfectly healthy, normal human being to have levels of intelligence and athleticism that could be considered superhuman. The only time CRISPR should be used on humans is when they have a deficiency that prevents them from living a normal life. In these cases, the person or their parent should be given the choice to use CRISPR, but even then, only once the technology has developed to a point where the current risks are greatly minimized.